All the commands of God work for the good of man. By that I mean that no one is left psychologically unfulfilled or warped by obeying the commands of God. Quite the opposite, mankind is fulfilled in the obeying of God's instructions. We need to work because it is good for us. There is something self-enriching in a job well done. The unemployed are miserable not just because they are out of money, but because they do not have the opportunity to work productively. We have all known hard-working individuals who quit working at 65 and died before their 67th birthday. The real reason, not the one that appears on their death certificate, is that they could not handle the emotional vacuum that results from lack of productivity. Vocational frustration. Next to lack of employment, the worst thing that can happen to a person is to have the wrong job. It is incredible how many people despise their work, no wonder it becomes such drudgery to them. And as technology advances, increasing numbers of people will discover they are ill-fitted for the vocation in which they find themselves. This is particularly true of the unskilled or those whose area of skill is automated out of existence. All vocational experts warn that this will be an increasing problem in the years ahead. One of the ways to avoid vocational frustration, or feeling like a round peg in a square hole, is to know your temperament and its natural vocational possibilities, then find work or a profession that allows you to express your natural temperament characteristics. Examine this brief exposure to the 4 temperament's vocational aptitudes and see if they sound familiar. Sparky Sanguines vocational aptitudes. The world is enriched by sanguines with their cheeriness and natural charisma. They usually make excellent salesmen and more than any other seem attracted to that profession. Sparky is so convincing that he could sell rubber crutches to people who aren't even crippled. If you ever want to watch Mr. Sanguine in action, just visit your local used car dealer. 2/3 of his salesmen are probably sanguines. In addition to being good salesmen, sanguines make excellent actors, entertainers, and preachers, particularly evangelists. They are outstanding masters of ceremonies, auctioneers, and sometimes leaders if properly blended with another temperament. Because of our mass media today, they are increasingly in demand within the political arena, where natural charisma has proven advantageous. Sanguines have charisma to burn. In the area of helping people, sanguines excel as hospital workers. Dr. Sanguine always has the best bedside manner. You may be on the verge of death, as white as the sheet you are lying on when he bubbles into the room, but before he leaves, he will lift your spirits by his natural charm. His obvious compassion in response to your tale of woe will almost make paying his exorbitant bill easy. Sanguines are never moderate about anything. Nurse Sanguine is equally enthusiastic about helping sick folk, and her radiant smile as she enters the room always gives you a pickup. In fact, most sick people respond to the sanguine's question of, "How are you today?" by saying, "Fine," whereas Nurse Melancholy asking the same question would probably receive the self-pitying lament of, "Miserable." No matter what work the sanguine enters, it should always give him extensive exposure to people. I think his chief contribution to life lies in making other people happy. Certainly someone should be assigned that task in these uncertain times. It is well known that sanguines are not too swift on detail. One of their biggest frustrations is the sales manager that wants them to use, purchase orders, or fill in all the blanks on contracts. Most sanguines can't even remember where they put the contracts, much less fill them out. They would much rather be out on the golf course with a client than strategizing, analyzing, or filling out forms. Most sanguines lament, "Paperwork is the bane of my life." While it is true sanguines are not natural detail hounds, they can do better. It is all a matter of self-discipline. That seems to be the most self-limiting thing a sanguine does, indulge his weaknesses and refuse to discipline himself. It is sad to have to say it, but sanguines usually limit their ultimate potential by their failure to discipline themselves. Every job has something undesirable about it, and changing jobs won't change that. Sooner or later you will find something in your new job that you don't like to do. When my wife and I launched a national television program, we thought it would be an exciting way to serve our Lord. We thoroughly enjoyed the filming of the programs, the meeting of new people, the exciting experience of learning a new field, and, of course, helping millions of people instead of thousands. But I had not counted on the 224 fundraising meetings all over the country during a recessionary year. I hated them. I love to teach and preach the Bible, but asking people for money to finance even this effective ministry. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in the work of God. In fact, I was tempted to quit 223 times. Now that such meetings are behind us, I'm glad we didn't quit under fire. A long time ago I learned that God is interested in finishers, not starters. Sanguines are so capable they look for instant success, but are not used to putting their head down and plowing on in the face of difficulty, opposition, or frustration. Once they learn that lesson, there is no limit to what God can do with them vocationally. Rocky Choleric's vocational potential. Any profession that requires leadership, motivation, and productivity is open to a choleric, provided it does not require too much attention to details and analytical planning. Committee meetings and long-range planning bore him, for he is a doer. Although he is not usually a craftsman, which requires a degree of perfection and efficiency usually beyond his capability, he often serves as a supervisor for craftsmen. He usually enjoys construction because he is so productive and will frequently end up as a foreman or project supervisor. Rocky is a developer by nature. When he and his wife drive through the countryside, he cannot share her enjoyment of the beautiful rolling hillsides, for he envisions road graders carving out streets and builders constructing homes, schools, and shopping centers. Most of today's cities and suburbs were first envisioned by a choleric. You can be sure, however, that he hired a melancholy as the architect with the analytical and creative ability to draw the plans he has outlined, for he could never do that himself. He still can't understand why a few lines on the back of an envelope aren't sufficient to gain the city planning department's approval. No one fights City Hall harder than a choleric, who bitterly laments, "Why all this business of detailed plans, anyway? I've built enough projects to know that the best plans have to be modified during construction, so why not make up your mind as you go along on the little issues? I know what I want to accomplish." It is a wise choleric who hires a melancholy as his assistant or goes into business partnership with a melancholy. Together they make an unbeatable team. Of course, since everyone has both a primary and secondary temperament, occasionally one meets a person with both traits. Most entrepreneurs are cholerics. They formulate the ideas and are venturesome enough to launch out in new directions. They don't limit themselves to their own ideas either, but sometimes overhear a creative idea from someone who is not sufficiently adventurous to initiate a new business or project. Once Rocky has started a new business, however, it is not unlike him to get bored soon after it is successful. There are two reasons for this. First, as the business grows under his dynamic leadership, of necessity it creates more detail work. But since cholerics are not by nature good delegators of responsibility, although with proper training they can learn, and tend to prefer the fruits of their own productive and capable industry, the efforts of others are evaluated as somewhat inadequate. Consequently, they end up trying to do everything themselves. Second, when visionary Rocky finds himself so inundated with the mass of details this successful venture has spawned, he looks for a buyer to assume those responsibilities in order to free his own time to launch something new. Thus, the average choleric can be expected to start 4 to 10 businesses or organizations in a lifetime. Once a choleric learns to delegate responsibility to others and discovers that he is able to accomplish more through other people, he can complete an amazing amount of work. Other people cannot believe that he can be involved in so many things and keep his sanity, but to Rocky Choleric it is really very simple. Since he is completely performance conscious and has no perfectionist hang-ups, he will reason, "I'd rather get a number of things finished 70 to 80% than a few things 100%. As Charlie Tremendous Jones says in his talks to businessmen, your motto should be, "From production to perfection." Cholerics love that philosophy, perfectionist melancholies reject it vigorously. Rocky Choleric is a natural motivator of other people. He oozes self-confidence, is extremely goal-conscious, and can inspire others to envision his goals. Consequently, his associates may find themselves more productive by following his lead. His primary weakness as a leader is that he is hard to please and tends to run roughshod over other people. If he only knew how others look to him for approval and encouragement, he would spend more time patting them on the back and acknowledging their accomplishments, which would generate even greater dedication from his colleagues. The problem is, however, the choleric subconsciously thinks that approval and encouragement will lead to complacency, and he assumes that an employee's productivity will fall off if he is too complimentary. Thus he will resort to criticism and fault-finding, in the hope that this will inspire greater effort. Unfortunately, he must learn that criticism is a demotivator. Once Rocky discovers that people require reassurance and stimulation in order to perform at the height of their potential, his role as leader radically improves. Learn a lesson from football's middle linebackers just before a crucial play. They walk up and down the line patting their teammates encouragingly. That touch silently urges, "I'm counting on you to do your best, don't let me down." As one lineman said of his defensive captain, "I'd lay down my life for that man." Interestingly enough, the captain was a perennial backpatter. In the early days of American industry, when business production and manufacturing were not so technical, our industrial complexes were largely built by cholerics. In these days, as technology demands greater sophistication and creativity, it is gradually turning for leadership to melancholies, or at least choleric melancholies or melancholic cholerics. Today, cholerics are more apt to build the factory buildings or the streets and highways which furnish the supply routes used by industry, whereas complex organization increasingly requires a more analytical leader. Don't feel sorry for the choleric of the future, he will figure out something worthy of his talents. He always lands on his feet. Cholerics have a built-in promotional ability and do well in sales, teaching, but always practical subjects: politics, military service, sports, and many other endeavors. Like the sanguine, Rocky choleric makes a good preacher in the pulpit. Not only is he a dynamic Bible teacher, but his organization and promotional ability together with his strong leadership gifts make it hard for the average fearful congregation to slow him down. According to an old saying, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. No one ever accused a choleric of being an angel. He launches into many projects and, with proper motivation and the blessing of God, usually enjoys a successful ministry. Western civilization has benefited much from its Rocky cholerics. Nordic, Teutonic, Germanic, Gallic, or Frankish people often had a high degree of choleric temperament. But it has suffered much from them also. The world's greatest generals, dictators, and gangsters have been mainly cholerics. What made the difference? Their moral values and motivations. If there is such a thing as a success tendency, cholerics have it. That doesn't mean they are smarter than other people, as is often assumed, but that their strong will and determination drive them to succeed where other more gifted people are prone to give up in the midst of their superior projects. If a job requires industry, hard work, and activity, Rocky choleric will usually outperform the other temperaments. If it demands analysis, long-range planning, meticulous skills, or creativity, that's a different ballgame. Rarely will you find a predominant choleric as a surgeon, dentist, philosopher, inventor, or watchmaker. Rocky's interests thrive upon activity, bigness, violence, and production. He is so optimistic, rarely anticipating failure, that he seldom fails, except at home. Vocational possibilities of Martin melancholy. As a general rule, no other temperament has a higher IQ, creativity, or imagination than a melancholy, and no one else is as capable of perfectionism. Most of the world's great composers, artists, musicians, inventors, philosophers, theoreticians, theologians, scientists, and dedicated educators have been predominantly melancholies. Name a famous artist, composer, or orchestra leader and you have identified another genius and an often eccentric melancholy. Consider Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Beethoven, Mozart, Wagner, and a host of others. Usually the greater the degree of genius, the greater will be the predominance of a melancholy temperament. Any vocation that requires perfection, self-sacrifice, and creativity is open to a Martin melancholy. However, he tends to place self-imposed limitations on his potential by underestimating himself and exaggerating obstacles. Almost any humanitarian vocation will attract melancholies to its staff. For years I have watched doctors, and although there are bound to be exceptions, almost every doctor I know is either predominantly or at least secondarily a melancholy. It would almost require a melancholy's mind to get through the rigors of medical school, for a doctor has to be a perfectionist, an analytical specialist and a humanitarian propelled by a heart that yearns to help other people. The analytical ability required to design buildings, lay out a landscape, or look at acreage and envision a cohesive development usually requires a melancholy temperament. In the building trades, the melancholy may want to supervise construction. However, he would be better off hiring a project supervisor who works better with people and then spend his own time on the drawing board. He becomes frustrated by the usual personnel problems and, with his unrealistic perfectionist demands, adds to them. Almost every true musician has some melancholy temperament, whether he be a composer, choral conductor, performing artist, or soloist. This often accounts for the melancholy's lament that seems to find its way into so much of our music, both in and out of the church. Just yesterday my wife and I were driving to the airport when a country western tune was crooned, or warbled, depending on your point of view, over the radio. We looked at each other and laughed as the wail of the obvious melancholy became so apparent, and that song is one of today's top tunes. The influence of temperament on a person's musical ability was apparent several years ago as our church evaluated a very gifted minister of music and his piano-playing wife, obviously a choleric. On the way home I reflected to my wife that I couldn't understand how a choleric could be such a good pianist. Beverly replied, "She is a mechanical musician. By strong willpower she forced herself to play the piano well, but she doesn't feel her music." As it turned out, the fantastic arrangement she used that night had been written by her husband, a melancholy. Although he was not a pianist, he could feel music. Not all melancholies, of course, enter the professions or arts. Many become craftsmen of a high quality, finish carpenters, bricklayers, plumbers, plasterers, scientists, nurserymen, playwrights, authors, mechanics, engineers, and members of almost every profession that provides a meaningful service to humanity. One vocation that seems to attract the melancholy, surprisingly enough, is acting, though we tend to identify this profession with an extrovert. On stage, the melancholy can become another person and even adopt that personality, no matter how much extroversion it requires. But as soon as the play is over and he comes down from his emotional high, he reverts back to his own more introverted personality. Vocational aptitudes of the phlegmatic. The world has benefited greatly from the gracious nature of Phil Phlegmatic. In his quiet way he has proved to be a fulfiller of the dreams of others. He is a master at anything that requires meticulous patience and daily routine. Most elementary school teachers are phlegmatics. Who but a phlegmatic could have the patience necessary to teach a group of first graders to read? A sanguine would spend the entire class period telling stories to the children. A melancholy would so criticize them that they would be afraid to read aloud. And I can't even imagine a choleric as a first-grade teacher. The students would leap out the windows. The gentle nature of the phlegmatic assures the ideal atmosphere for such learning. This is not only true on the elementary level but in both high school and college, particularly in math, physics, grammar, literature, language classes, and others. It is not uncommon to find phlegmatics as school administrators, librarians, counselors, and college department heads. Phlegmatics seem drawn to the field of education. Another field that appeals to phlegmatics is engineering. Attracted to planning and calculation, they make good structural engineers, sanitation experts, chemical engineers, draftsmen, mechanical and civil engineers, and statisticians. Most phlegmatics have excellent mechanical aptitude and thus become good mechanics, tool and die specialists, craftsmen, carpenters, electricians, plasterers, glassblowers, watch and camera repairmen. The biggest problem faced by industry pertains to personnel. With wages for many jobs skyrocketing, disharmony in a department can so demotivate employees that the employer may lose millions of dollars in productivity. In recent years, management has begun to discover that experienced phlegmatics in their employ often make excellent foremen, supervisors, and managers of people. Because they are diplomatic and unabrasive, people work well with them. When given positions of leadership, they seem to bring order out of chaos and produce a working harmony that is conducive to increased productivity. They are well organized, never come to a meeting unprepared or late, tend to work well under pressure, and are extremely dependable. Phlegmatics often stay with one company for their entire working career. An interesting aspect of their leadership ability is that they almost never volunteer for authoritative responsibilities, which is why I labeled them reluctant leaders. Secretly, a phlegmatic may aspire for a promotion, but it would be against his nature to volunteer. Instead, he may patiently wait until more discordant and inept personalities make a mess out of things and then assume the responsibility only after it is forced upon him. Unfortunately, in many instances phlegmatics wait their lives away and opportunity never knocks, because although employers appreciate their capabilities, they don't envision them as leaders. Consequently, both the company and the employees lose. Rarely does a phlegmatic either live up to his full capabilities or fail in life. Phlegmatics may take a job with retirement or security benefits in mind, therefore, civil service, the military, local government or some other, good security risk, will attract them. Rarely will they launch out on a business venture of their own, although they are eminently qualified to do so. Instead, they usually enhance the earning power of someone else and are quite content with a simple lifestyle. Temperament test. You will find the self-scoring temperament test on pages your personal profile blob chart very interesting now that you realize your temperament is the key to your vocational aptitude. You may even be more interested in the more professional temperament test, which I developed over a 15-year period to help Christians find the right vocation and the best place in their own local church to serve the Lord. In the personalized analysis, which gives a thorough appraisal of your primary and secondary temperament, I included 50 vocational aptitudes which would fit your unique combination of temperaments. You also will find helpful the 30 possible places of service in your local church to which you would be best suited, based on your temperament combination. The $10 gift certificate in the back of this book entitles you to a discount off the current cost of this test. How to find the right job. Next to salvation, marriage, and your family, your vocation is the most important thing in your life. For that reason, I would like to give you some of the practical suggestions I have personally shared with hundreds of men and women about how to change jobs, find one, or evaluate a new one. Finding a lifetime vocation is really not too difficult if you're a Christian and if you're committed to seeking the Lord's will for your life. But don't expect it to be the dramatic thing it is for some people. I find that the narration of a dynamic experience of finding God's will to be very inspirational in a church service, but with most of us it is a slow, step-by-step process. While it is still true that God speaks to us today, it is rarely in the audible voice with which He spoke to Abraham, Isaac, and Moses. Most of us hear God by the gentle urging of our heart, or a burden that He puts into our hearts to do something. As we walk by faith, moving in the direction of that burden, we gradually find ourselves doing that will. For most of us, finding the will of God is not the electrifying experience of a moment, but a continuing process over a long period of time. We climb the mountain at hand only to find it leads to the next mountain. Then when we get to a central point, we can look back and say, "Thank you, God, for your faithful leading." God is interested in directing your life into the most productive and effective place where you can serve Him. But He is first and foremost interested in you as a person. Most Christians have the attitude about finding God's will that was reflected by one man's honest but somewhat irreverent prayer: "Dear Lord, please write out on paper your plan for my life during the next 10 years, and if I like it, I'll do it." Naturally, we would never say such a thing, but often Christians act that way. Instead, God wants us to walk in unbroken fellowship with Him so He can lead us in the making of the thousands of decisions in life that ultimately lead us to fulfill the perfect will of God. The problem with most of us is that we are always in a hurry. God never rushes. He is more interested in our daily dependence on Him than in all of the specifics. The reason He seldom gives us much advance warning or leading about His will is because He knows that even if we saw a 10-year blueprint, we would be off trying to do it and seldom check in at headquarters until we completed it or ran into a problem. Finding God's will for your life is not only the best possible way to live, it should also bring you closer to Him in the process. My favorite verses in the Bible on this subject are: "Trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him and He will do this. He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes." Ps. 37, 3-7, Niv, emphasis mine. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight." Prov. 3, 5-6, Niv. Once you have committed yourself to live the kind of life described above, you cannot go wrong. That doesn't mean you won't have problems or face obstacles. I have never known anyone who accomplished anything for God, great or small, who didn't find obstacles in his path. But it is end results with which we are concerned. The following steps will guide you to finding the Lord's direction in your vocation. 7 steps to finding the right vocation. 1. Establish your primary purpose in life according to Matthew 6:33. What is your real purpose in changing jobs or finding a new vocation? It should be the same as your life's motivation which Jesus outlined for every Christian, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Matt 6:33, NIV. Once you have determined that your primary purpose is to seek first the kingdom of God, then and only then are you ready to find a different position. More money, better opportunity for advancement, or more enjoyable work, are not good answers in themselves. Settle the matter of who is first in your life, whose servant you are. See 1 Cor. 6:19-20. Then you can get on with what is second. You may need more money, better opportunity, etc., and God knows that, but you need to know that your primary desire is to seek first the advancement of the kingdom. That principle alone will save you many headaches. For example, all through the years of my counseling I have said, privately and publicly, that anyone who has a job that requires they work every Sunday so they can rarely, if ever, attend church has the wrong job. God's will on Sunday is that we attend church. There is no question on that. If your job will not permit you to obey God, then you have the wrong job. 20 years ago, a personable supermarket manager with a wife and 3 small girls told me, "I can't come to church because I work on Sundays, that way I get double time pay." I told him that was wrong motivation for working on Sunday. Once in a while is understandable. Even in the Old Testament, when the ox got into the ditch on the Sabbath day, it had to be pulled out. Jesus also endorsed that plan. Obviously, someone is going to have to work on the Sabbath and get dirty. But God said okay because it was only occasional or an emergency. But every Sabbath day was different, so it is with the Lord's day. I watched that man lose his wife and 3 girls to a carnal, Southern California lifestyle. His double time pay cost him far more than it gained him. And now that it is too late, he has realized it. This same principle will help guide you in the kind of employment you seek. If it involves illegal or harmful products, that is not seeking the kingdom of God. A woman told me she turned down $20,000 a year in perks as an executive secretary because it involved all-night entertaining of some of the firm's out-of-town customers. There are some things more important in life than money. Matthew 6:33 makes that clear. 2. Analyze your temperament. The Ample Temperament Test on your personal profile blob chart will help you determine your temperament, which is a key to your vocational aptitude. We have already gone into detail on the vocational capabilities of each of the 4 temperaments. The following rule of thumb will give you general guidance, although you would really benefit from taking the temperament test described in the back of this book. Sanguines are people-oriented salesman types who excel in public relations, people helping, or anything that requires charisma. Cholerics are strong natural leaders that are goal or project-oriented. Individuals who like to manage people. Melancholies are creative, analytical individuals with strong perfectionist tendencies who often have aesthetic traits. Phlegmatics are cool, detailed individuals who tend to limit themselves. They can do statistical, microscopic work that would drive others berserk. With that brief overview, you can tell generally what kind of vocation best suits your needs. If you are discontent in your present employment, your temperament test may reveal you are in the wrong type of work. 3. Pray. The introductory verse at the beginning of this section covered the key words: pray, trust, commit, and acknowledge God. That is what prayer is. It is what asking God is based upon. If you are unemployed or dissatisfied where you are employed, then pray about it. God will either remove your discontentment or open the door to a new opportunity, if you give Him time and draw closer to Him during the waiting period. 4. Share your concern with others you can trust. Regardless of your temperament, you will find it helpful to share your burden with a friend. That's what friends are for. As the scripture says, bear one another's burdens and fulfill the law of Christ. How can a friend share a burden unless you let him? Usually it is helpful just to verbalize to another person your innermost thoughts. And those who find that kind of talk the most difficult are the very ones who need it most. Be sure the friend with whom you seek counsel shares your spiritual values. Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed, happy, is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked." NIV. That is so important. Many a Christian has sought counsel from a professional counselor or vocational counselor and failed to filter that counsel in the light of the fact that the individual did not share his eternal perspective in relation to God, life, death, or eternity. As a pastor, I saw many individuals heed the advice of non-Christians at their peril. Talking out your burden or sharing it with your friends does more than just help you clarify your thinking. It puts others on the alert for opportunities. I have been amazed at the way God opens doors through other people. 5. Investigate. Don't plan to sit back after you have prayed about it and expect God to send down a job on a white cloud. Prayer usually motivates us to do something, like look in the want ads. I have a friend who, while praying about her need, felt the urge to read the want ads and found a local Christian doctor looking for help. He had prayed for guidance 3 days before and felt led to call the newspaper. His ad was only in the paper 3 days. She caught it the first day, and now 2 Christians who wanted to work with a Christian both got the answer to their prayer. Oftentimes the biblical directive, "You have not because you ask not," seriously limits our lives vocationally. Some reading this may be entirely unskilled. You may have married young thinking, "It will all work out," and now find yourself unemployable. You may well need to go back to school. An industrial arts program or some other specialized training plan may be your need. Make a list of the kind of jobs you think you would enjoy doing and that pay what you feel you will need for your family to live on. Then prioritize those on the top of your list and start contacting them. If you need to take night school or specialized training, do it. It is becoming increasingly necessary that everyone going out into the workforce be trained in some area. Even the Bible says a workman is one who studies, 2 Tim 2:15. There are very few positions that do not require study. If that's what it takes, do it. When I was 48 years old, I enrolled in graduate school at Western Conservative Bible Seminary, through their San Diego satellite program. It took 4 long years and lots of hard work to meet their rigorous demands, but finally I earned my degree. I found it a very stimulating influence on my whole ministry to go back to school. Even after being a college president for 6 years, you're never too old to learn. Many people have found a whole new stimulating vocational life open to them by paying the price to get some advanced training either in their chosen field or in another. God has given you certain basic skills. You will never get more than He gave you, but through training, discipline, and practice you can improve and refine those skills. Personally, I don't believe God will do anything for us vocationally that we can do for ourselves. 6. Be faithful and watch for the open door. Our Lord said, "These are the words of Him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What He opens, no one can shut, and what He shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." Rev. 3, 7-8, Niv. I have found that our Lord is the master of the open door. That is, He leads us to an open door of opportunity to serve Him. The best advice I have ever heard is that we do not need a lifetime roadmap or master plan for our lives. We just need to stay in close fellowship with the Master, who does have a plan for our lives. So we should busy ourselves cleaning up the room we are now in, and God will, in His own time, open another door for us. Once inside, we will find it too needs a lot of hard work, so we should busy ourselves cleaning up the second room. About the time we get that room cleaned up, there will be a third door open to us, then a fourth, and so on. Finally we will look back and say, hasn't God been faithful to lead us into so many places of opportunity to serve Him? But in the meantime we need to be found faithful, cleaning up the room we are in. I shall never forget my first church. We were building a sign in front of the church, and I was in my study when the truck delivering bricks arrived. I signed for the delivery and the driver said, "Who do you have to unload these bricks?" I said, "We're paying you to deliver them." To which he replied, "I am a truck driver, not a laborer. Unless you find someone to unload these bricks, I will return them to the plant." So I jumped up in the truck and proceeded to unload the bricks. That was 30 years ago. I have never wanted for work. In fact, my only frustration is that I can't do all the things I would like to. I've often wondered how long the truck driver kept his job. With that attitude, probably not very long. God doesn't ask us all to be successful or to hit a home run every time at bat. He does, however, ask that we be faithful. That is something everyone should be. Right where we are. Don't let your interest in a new job keep you from being faithful where you are. 7. Anticipate the future with peace and confidence. God holds the key to your future, so don't worry about it. Our Lord spoke about that many times in words like these. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air, they do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or, what shall we drink? Or, what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Matt. 6:25-34, Niv. It is one thing to be concerned about the future, it is quite another to worry about it. When you commit your way to God, you don't have to worry about the future. I have to remind myself of that fact every now and then. It helps to have many Bible verses hidden in your heart for instant recall. When you're in a ministry like mine, where you're dependent on the response to monthly mailings to carry on the Lord's work, you are very vulnerable to the erratic responses of people. Summer is a disaster, December is almost as bad, and January and February are slow starters. That leaves 6 good months out of the year. Recession, inflation, late mailings, foul-ups at the printers, the mailing house or some other vendor can even lose one of those months. Such ministries are well labeled, faith ministries, you live week by faith. But then, who doesn't? Insurance companies and even banks can fail, and only God knows if Social Security will last. In the final analysis, you're in good hands only when you trust the living God. The one thing you have going for you is that your God is the God of the future. I have often comforted myself with this thought: God has never failed anyone, Tim, so why should he make an exception of you? You're just not that important. God gets more glory for himself by being faithful. He won't let you down. Remember Noah, Abraham, Moses, Job, David, Peter, John, Paul, and millions of others. Chapter 7. Uses of temperament in the workplace. As a student of psychology for over 30 years, I long ago made the observation that the business community had a much more effective model of human behavior than did the academic. The colleges seemed obsessed with humanistic psychology that started out on so many false premises. We shouldn't be surprised that it changes every few years. We have seen Freudian psychology, once the shrine before which the university crowd gladly bowed, replaced by Rogerianism, behaviorism, Gestalt theory, reality therapy, transactional analysis, and much frustration, particularly by the patients whose only consistent observation was the exorbitant bill that came to their home each month. What are the false premises of humanistic psychology? Very simply that 1. Man is an evolved animal. 2. Man has no inherited conscience. 3. There is no creator God. 4. There is no absolute standard for behavior given by that God. 5. Man, like the animals, has no soul, so when you're dead, and 6. Man's ultimate end is self-actualization. Given those basic assumptions, it is no wonder modern psychology has wrought such havoc in our society. We have more schizophrenic, mentally ill, depressed, suicidal, hostile, and upset people today than before we had psychologists. The reason is very simple. A basic axiom of all logic is, if you start out on a wrong premise, you will end up with a wrong conclusion. I've counseled enough psychologists and their wives to know that their solutions, without God, are impractical. They just don't work. Much of the advice given by secular humanist psychologists is not only wrong, but harmful. Business is quite a different matter. Industrial psychology may not be given much shrift in the halls of academia, but it helps far more people than clinical psychology. And interestingly enough, it is based on the theory of the 4 temperaments. For some reason, American psychologists have been heavily influenced by Sigmund Freud, although they have discounted many of his obsolete theories and developed a godless modern version of their own. But few American professors have embraced the scholarly works of Dr. H. J. Eysenck of England. He is highly respected in Europe and in the industrial, sales, and management fields of psychology in this country. In fact, most of the popular programs used in business management, sales, and personal development are based on his exhaustive research. And Dr. Eysenck is an advocate of the four-temperament theory, which he ascribes to Hippocrates. The Educational and Industrial Testing Service is a San Diego-based company that produces the EPI, Eysenck Personality Inventory. The following diagram, Figure 1, is an Eysenck trademark of both his books, and this test note how similar it is to the basic chart, Figure 2, which I have refined from many other sources plus my own observations. The similarities are such that both are obviously based on the ancient theory of the four temperaments. Through the years I have received hundreds of letters from people who have read my books on temperament or have heard my lectures on the subject. Many of those letters are about personality testing they have gone through, sales management training, or vocational training programs they have taken. In all the materials I have received, there is a consistent similarity to the four-temperament theory. I have studied these materials, whether produced in Denver, Minneapolis, Chicago, or Dallas. I find they are based on the careful research of Dr. Eysenck or the theory of the four temperaments or both. Harvard Business Review. For example, in the Harvard Business Review, published by the Graduate School of Business Administration of Harvard University, Dr. Theodore Levitt wrote an interesting article entitled, "The Managerial Merry-Go-Round," in which he points out, people have different cognitive styles, that is, ways of gathering and evaluating information. Some are systematic thinkers, others intuitive thinkers, some are receptive thinkers and others perceptive thinkers. These styles seem to be inherent and are fairly fixed by the time people reach maturity. What is even more instructive is that the research found that these styles greatly affect the way people perform the jobs they choose, and can even determine the industries they enter. Fact and Fiction in Psychology, Penguin Books, 1965, page 55. You will notice that this article is divergent from humanistic psychology's claim that all people are born neutral and that environment molds one's behavior. The business community recognizes that it is worthwhile to train management personnel at every level, but it also recognizes that there are inborn characteristics in people that are irreversible. Each of us marches to a different drummer. The secret of good teamwork is blending contrasting executive styles, argue Stuart Atkins and Alan Katcher, President and Vice President respectively of Atkins Katcher Associates, Inc., management consultants in Beverly Hills, California. The following excerpts appeared in Nation's Business, March 1975. To get the best performance from your executive team, you have to orchestrate them, getting each to give his best and helping them to blend their strengths for peak performance as a group. To achieve this, you must analyze their different styles of operating. Everyone is a mixture of four basic behavior patterns, usually with one dominating. The others, less used, come into play when the situation calls for them. There are, however, no good or bad styles. A person whose dominant style is supporting giving tends to be trusting, responsive, idealistic and loyal. He tries to do the very best he can whenever you assign him a task, and he sets high standards for himself and his people. Highly receptive to others' ideas, he cooperates and is helpful, a natural team player. Personality profile testing. In recent years, the business community has begun using a series of tests which they administer to screen employees for major industries. The individual takes a test consisting of 150 adjectives mostly worked out by Dr. Eysenck. One firm sends a test to 5 of the prospect's friends to determine how the individual is seen by other people. The test results do not use the terms sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, melancholy, but anyone familiar with their meaning will recognize their parallel with expressive, driver, analytical, and amiable. Call it what you may, the final results are much the same. One testing group calls them 4 social styles, and points out that most people are a combination of at least 2 social styles. As you examine their instrument in Figure 3, you will find a basic similarity to what we have studied as the 4 basic temperaments. The test results locate a person's primary and secondary social style. A verbal description of each social style is pictured in Figure 4, shows a marked similarity to our 4 temperament theory. In the September 1979 issue of Dallas, I found a very interesting article on the variety of chief executive officers (CEOs) in the dynamic world of Metro Dallas. I've been to that city several times, and even as I write this I'm standing in the Registry Hotel located in the heart of the boom growth of North Dallas. Bill Sloan, author of Life at the Top, had noticed 4 styles of CEOs in the plush offices of the mirrored towers in Dallas. He called them initiator, thinker, feeler, and censor, titles used by many management consultants, but they are just different names for melancholy, phlegmatic, sanguine, and choleric. He used Mary Kay, the famous head of a gigantic cosmetic industry, as an example of a feeler, which he describes as sentimental, loyal and true blue, thrives on personal relationships. He then explains she is heavily into the world of people and is an excellent motivator. To him, Ross Perot, the genius who started out renting time on computers to sell to clients and today owns banks of computers and heads a multi-million-dollar corporation in Dallas, is an example of an intuitor or melancholy whose creativity and penchant for innovation together with his workaholic drive have taken him to the top. 4 basic social styles. Shorthand descriptions of the basic social styles. Not only did this personnel expert point out the 4 types of managers in parallel to the 4 temperament theory, but he confirms what I have long suspected. That all 4 types can make successful CEOs, but in different fields and with different styles. Feelers, or sanguines, make good sales managers, personnel directors, and goodwill ambassadors. Intuitors, melancholies, make excellent advertising executives, public relations directors, heads of research, or anything that demands creativity. Thinkers, phlegmatics, are best suited as finance directors, heads of engineering groups, executive vice presidents, etc. The censor, choleric, is in charge and can run any kind of corporation if given the right personnel. Whether you call them thinkers, or phlegmatics, intuitors, or melancholies, they are the same. You are talking about inherited temperament that can be improved, educated, and refined, but does not change. Mary Kay was a feeler at 4 years of age, and is a super successful sanguine. She is still a feeler, toucher, or people person. No doubt she has learned discipline, organization, and management, but she was a born motivator with charisma to burn. We all inherited a temperament that produces our style. No one style is better than another, but each fits different kinds of work better than others. Management would be advised to spend more time discovering an employee's temperament so he can train him for the work for which he is best fitted. 4 types, the dominant model. During the past 50 years many theories of behavior have been proposed. The most effective and long-lasting are based to some degree at least on a model of 4 types or styles of behavior. People are different, they act differently, respond differently, and react differently. One government training specialist pointed out that the November 1982 issue of Training magazine listed 15 of the most common theories. Some of the most common are listed on the following pages. Admittedly, they are abbreviated drastically, but notice how each fits under one of the 4 temperament theory categories. Although the authors may not wish to admit to such similarity to the world's most ancient theory of behavior which we have been studying, when put on this chart, figure 5, it would seem such similarities exist. The 4 behavior style theories. This chart, figure 5, could only have been produced by a thorough student of both the 4 temperaments and the modern attempts to explain or test man's behavior based on Eysenck's research. I reproduce it here for students of both fields so they can see how the modern trends are taking us back to the days of Hippocrates and even to Agur in the book of Proverbs. The business community for the past 20 years has been increasingly aware of the practicality of the temperament theory. They may call him expressive instead of sparky sanguine, but they mean the same temperament. They may call him driver analytical, but they still mean the choleric melancholy temperament. I predict that whatever they call it, the business community, because of its commitment to practicality, cost-effectiveness, and personnel development, will lead us away from the unrealistic idealism of humanistic psychology to the more relevant 4 temperament theory of behavior to explain why man acts the way he does and what he can do about it. The reason is very simple: it works. The most obvious use of the 4 behavioral styles of business or the 4 temperament theory comes in helping people to understand why they act the way they do and in helping them learn to modify their communication styles. The four-temperament theory of the ancients or the four behavior styles of modern industry are an excellent way to present training programs. It is a handy aid in not only improving communication skills, but time management, leadership styles, performance appraisals, team building, conflict resolution, and improved productivity. A while ago I sent the department heads of family life seminars to a management conference conducted by Arthur F. Miller of People Management, Incorporated. This man, who has spent a lifetime in management training and consultation, said that 1 out of 2 persons in the United States is in the wrong job. This increases job-related conflicts and stress in both the workplace and in the employee's home or family life. Now you see why I say our nation has ignored the four-temperament theory at its peril for many years. If the psychology departments of our major universities would once again return to the ancient theory of human temperament, update it, and use it on our 13 million college students and/or 20 million high school students, it would have a positive effect in both the workplace and family life. Mr. Miller says that he is familiar with the inside personnel procedures of some of the largest companies in America, but unfortunately, no one has a plan to match an employee's job with his strengths and weaknesses. That would explain why so many people spend their life doing a job they dislike and then go home to take out the frustrations on the people they love most, or ease their stress temporarily by drug or alcohol. Hopefully the last decade and a half of this century will find more emphasis on job fitness or helping people select the vocation in life for which they are best fitted. The temperament theory can really help this field. As modern research continues to produce new and better ways of testing, training, and developing people's natural traits, work habits, and social styles, we will find a continuing use of the four-temperament theory. You, as a reader of this book, will be ahead of the pack because you understand the basic theory. And if you have experienced the powerful work of the Spirit of God as outlined earlier, you will already have a handle on overcoming your weaknesses and maximizing your potential. Chapter 8. Other ways to use the four-temperament theory. The four-temperament theory is not a cure-all for everything, but it certainly is a good tool to use in helping us get along with other people. I have always presented it with 2 primary uses in mind: self-improvement and improving your interpersonal relationships. But there are many other ways which you will find helpful. I shall suggest a dozen or so, then you can add some of your own. I have found the temperament theory to be most helpful, and there is no end to the uses or applications you can make for it. However, the first and best use is on yourself. Once you have learned the theory and how to strengthen your own weaknesses, you will find it helpful in the following ways. 1. Counseling others. I mention counseling to begin with because that is one place I have personally used it in helping thousands of people. It is a wonderful tool for diagnosing people's problems. You cannot help anyone unless you know what their root problem is. Many times the things they say are not the real cause of their difficulties. To me, counseling is helping people apply biblical principles to their lives where they cannot apply them alone. Most counselees don't know why they are so miserable. Consequently, the first thing any counselor does is listen and try to diagnose the individual's major difficulty. If you understand the four temperaments, it streamlines the diagnostic process. By watching the counselee carefully for giveaway signs through body language, speech, attitudes, and the general flow of their conversation, it is usually easy to diagnose an upset person's primary temperament. Once I have done this, I look for problems associated with their temperament. If he is a sanguine, I look for anger, insecurity, lack of discipline, and sometimes immorality. If he is choleric, I look for anger, bitterness, and other forms of hostility, self-justification, coldness, or eruptions, and a tendency to run roughshod over others. If I am working with a melancholy person, I expect self-condemnation, depression, self-limitation, criticism, a negative and critical spirit, or ingratitude toward God and others. In a melancholy man I sometimes anticipate male impotence, or in a woman the frustration of frigidity. Phlegmatics tend to clutter their lives with worry, fear, procrastination, and lack of motivation. I rarely have discovered immorality among phlegmatic men, but occasionally a phlegmatic woman, due to her tendency to go along and keep the peace, may give in to the temptation. All of these problems and others for the various temperaments need to be considered and addressed in the counseling room. Unless an individual is confronted with biblical standards of behavior, he will not be lastingly helped. Once you diagnose and confront the individual with the problem, she needs a spiritual prescription to build the cure on. But the administration of the prescription should be given with her temperament in view. Sanguines and phlegmatics need a midweek call just to check up on their faithfulness. They need that extra prod to get going. The choleric needs to be assured that the formula will work, and the melancholy needs to keep from making a 3-hour production out of a 20-minute-a-day assignment. Counseling people can be an enjoyable experience if you see progress in most of them. Knowing and using the temperament theory is a tool for improving the counselor's success ratio. 2. Using the temperament theory in selling. The salesman who approaches people according to their temperaments will be more successful than the one who approaches everyone alike. People differ, and good salesmen know it and approach them accordingly. Sanguines are impulse buyers and are notorious for having no sales resistance. They aren't interested in details, but enjoy success stories. They love being entertained, and usually they enact their biggest deals on the golf course or in the restaurant. Be sure to stress feelings, ego, and everyone has one, and usually you will make a sale 80% of the time. Get a good down payment though, for he changes his mind easily. Cholerics are tougher to sell. Being practical, they respond to need. Why do they need it? How will they use it? What real value does it have? How much will it be worth 5 years from now? Ask his opinion and listen as if to an expert. He loves bargains, so give him a discount. He is opinionated, so get the kind and color he wants. Don't try to con him, but be sure and show him how he can pay for it. If you have been convincing, he may buy. Don't clutter your presentation with too much detail. Give 1 or 2 success stories, but don't waste his valuable time talking too much. If he really wants what you have, he is a 70% sales prospect and not usually given to shopping around. Let him see it and handle it, then back off. He will sell himself. Melancholies need facts, statistics, charts, and detail. Don't try to bluff them. If you don't know your product, don't even bother to call on them. They can ask more questions about your product than both the inventor and manufacturer ever thought of. When he asks a question, find the answer. But always tell the truth. He has a memory like an elephant. Leave a good brochure, go find the answer, and then return. He has thousands of honest doubts and questions. Treat all his doubts and criticisms as requests for more information. He only buys the best he can afford, so convince him your product is the best on the market for the price. If it isn't, go work for the best or don't try to sell him. He doesn't want to hear a lot of success stories. He wants to know what your product will do for him, his home, or his company. Don't try to entertain him. He prides himself on the fact that he can't be bought. Send him something at Christmas time or after your first sale. Build a relationship of reliability and see that your firm services his account, and he will become a customer for years. Sales prospects are 50-50, but he gets terrible buyer's remorse the day after signing a contract. A follow-up call and enthusiastic report do wonders. And be sure to instruct him or his people on the use of your product. Remember, you're building a lifetime client. He has that potential. Phlegmatics love to be sold, but cannot be pressured. They like a combination of detail and success stories. They buy for many reasons, including prestige and practicality. Rarely do they buy the top of the line. Remember, they are not flamboyant. They prefer the stripped-down version. Give them plenty of latitude in choosing a price range, $20,000 or $50,000. Let them guide you to their needs. They beg to be entertained and love to be persuaded. Invite their wives along. It makes them feel important. They ask intelligent questions and must have all their fears assuaged or it's no sale. Help them to see that your product will save money in the long run. Treat them with respect. Don't fawn over them, but answer their questions and go back until they buy. The more attention you give them, the more obligated they feel. But after the sale, if you drop them like a hot potato, they may never buy from you again. Like the melancholy, they can develop buyer's remorse. They need assurance after the sale that they did the right tiling. Another success story or news about another company that just bought your product will do it. They usually use their old equipment 1 or 2 years longer than others. I heard an interesting thing in a Chicago airport as I was writing the above. A businessman who identified himself as a salesman for a major household product, and I began talking, and he asked what I was writing. When I described the 4-temperament approach to selling, his eyes opened wide and I asked if he agreed. His response was interesting. I can name people and describe examples of these 4 types. We deal with them every day. 3. Using temperaments in managing people. Good management involves selection, training, motivating, and controlling people as they work harmoniously toward a united goal. The first and most important thing in good management is to put the right people in the right place. We have already seen how understanding the 4 temperaments and applying this to people is helpful. But it is also a good tool for managers to use in getting the most out of people once they are on the payroll. Sanguines are predictably unpredictable. Their natural lack of discipline makes them late and unprepared when they come to work each day. Either they must be trained to do detail work or provided with a secretary who can do it for them. Their greatest asset is production and sales. Don't expect them to conform to all company policy. The biggest task a manager has is guiding them to spend 90% of their time in their most productive area. If they cannot conform, they will become liabilities. I know a salesman who could not resist the temptation to throw in extra goodies to his customers and make extra promises that were not company policy in order to make sales. The company president told me, he made so many sales his commissions were more than my salary. And when we fired him for giving away the company store, we discovered that his expenses, commissions, shipping charges, etc., cost us $800,000 more than our profits. Obviously, such individuals need close supervision, but they don't like it. Cholerics are self-starters and quick learners. Don't be afraid to delegate responsibility to them. But make sure they fully understand the guidelines, objectives, and limits. Expect confrontation. They will challenge your authority. Don't flunk their test. If you give them an inch, they will take 3 miles. And don't let them run roughshod over people. They need management training but are worth it because they can accomplish a ton of work. Just remember, he is after your job. Melancholies are temperamental people. Make sure they are in the right field. They need constant encouragement that they have worth and are capable, and they usually are. Try not to give them too many things to do at the same time or they will explode, quit, or collapse. He is the one person who may foul up his home life working too late or taking work home. Help him see that his brand of perfectionism is not necessary to the production of a top-quality product. With proper encouragement and reward, he may be with you for life. Phlegmatics are nuts and bolts, quiet people who can be depended on if you keep their eyes on the goals. But you must set their goals. By nature they would accept 55% of their capability. They work best under pressure but balk at high pressure, so keep it gentle, reasonable, and encouraging. They also need plenty of approval. Sometimes time-study training will be needed to help them make better use of their time. They may never defy you, but don't be surprised if they ignore you. They need constant reminders of productivity. The thing all managers need to keep in mind is, don't expect other people to do things like you would. They are individuals. They have distinct talents and abilities. Help them function within those capabilities. I have found that most people, particularly Christians, will rise to a challenge if they are treated with love and respect. 4. Use it in educating others. The 4 temperament theory is an invaluable tool in educating individuals. One of my criticisms of the monstrous business of education today is that they have ignored the temperaments of children in their teaching process. Educators have made a shambles out of our once great school system with their untested theories that have set the learning process back instead of forward. The gifted melancholy student is a fast learner who may not need rote learning. But to scrap the rote method for all students is to disregard their temperaments. The sanguine, choleric, or phlegmatic child needs rote learning and disciplined drills to become proficient gradually. As the basic principles of math, reading, or history begin to fall into place, he can become a self-starter thinker. Sanguines are restless, temperamental flitters, phlegmatics are daydreamers, and cholerics spin off on their own tangents. A wise teacher will try to diagnose her pupils' tendencies and motivate them according to need. Sanguines and phlegmatics need prodding. Cholerics need goals and knowledge as to why something is relevant. Melancholies need exposure to the subject and encouragement, and as we have seen in a previous chapter, each temperament has subject strengths they enjoy and subject weaknesses. If you know his temperament, you can give him the encouragement he needs accordingly. 5. Use the temperament theory to resolve personality conflicts. Some people are so difficult, the Lord himself couldn't get along with them. During his day he clashed with the legalists who refused to believe in him and finally called them, whited sepulchres filled with dead men's bones. But most people with whom we clash are different temperaments, that's why we clash. For example, the melancholy perfectionist is orderly and precise. As such he is destined to clash with the free-spirited casual carelessness of the sanguine. They will irritate each other. The sanguine can get irritated by what he considers the fastidiousness of the melancholy. One great cause of conflict between the two is exactness of language. The sanguine guesstimates on figures, mileage, and details, while the melancholy feels it his duty to correct the sanguine. No wonder they irritate each other, whether in marriage, business, or church. The melancholy destroys the sanguine's ego by such corrections, so the sanguine lashes out in retaliation with his best weapon, his tongue. Cholerics have a similar problem. They walk faster, talk faster, and think faster than the laid-back phlegmatic. The relationship of the phlegmatic is both a source of irritation to the choleric and a challenge. The more the choleric tries to motivate the phlegmatic, the more the phlegmatic digs in his heels and stubbornly refuses to move. The hostility such interpersonal contacts can generate is incredible. However, sanguines can irritate cholerics also, but not for the same reasons that irritate the melancholy. But if you want to see an explosion, just watch a sanguine and choleric locked in personality conflict. The two temperaments that seem to have the least conflict are the sanguine and the phlegmatic. There are two main reasons for personality clashes. 1. Temperament conflicts, that is, two individuals that are so different they spontaneously act and react entirely opposite in almost every situation. Or 2. We see our weaknesses in someone we love and tend to overreact. This often happens to a parent who clashes with a child who picks up the parent's weaknesses. The first is easier to resolve than the second. Once you recognize that your conflict with another person is because your temperaments are so opposite, it is easier to accept that difference. You recognize it is not personal but natural. This is the old, equal but different, idea. You can respect the other person's right to be different from yourself without superiority or inferiority being involved. The problem is, many people tend to look down on another's differences. That is where the spirit-filled life is of great value. When we are filled with love, joy, peace, etc., including meekness, we will find it easier to accept the erratic or different reactions of others. That is just one step to anticipating them. For example, I have a sanguine friend who used to drive me up the wall with his gross exaggerations. He calls them embellishments. I could never count on his facts, estimates, or schedules. Instead of getting irritated all the time, I just began dividing everything he said by 4, and then I could realistically anticipate his cost estimates and projections. For my pessimistic friends, I just anticipate their gloom, doom, and despair mentality and work around it. For example, my dentist wanted to tear out my bridge and rework the whole thing. I challenged him to patch it, and even suggested how. It took a lot of persuasion, but he finally did it against his better judgment, saying, "It won't last." I am now on my 3rd year with that repair job, and he still can't believe it will hold. If you take no for an answer from some people, you will both be the losers for it. The temperament theory won't solve all personality conflicts, but it can reduce them down to size and make them livable. 6. Use the theory to understand the other members of your church boards and committees. One of the proofs that the local church is divinely inspired and empowered of God is that even democracy, demanded by most church leaders, still hasn't killed it. This is a day when everyone wants to be a part of the decision-making process. If the pastor is a dictator, the people complain that the church is dominated by one man. If it is a deacon-led church with 70 elders or deacons, there will be people who complain it entrusts too much power in the board. I have come to the conclusion that most people complain about any leader if he makes a decision they don't like. I have worked with church boards for 32 years, and I can vouch for the fact that all 4 temperaments get on any board of 7 or more people and usually react according to temperament. I'll never forget the time we were $56,000 in the red during a recession, and the melancholies on the 11-member board of trustees wanted to cut salaries and lay off several staff members. It took all the optimistic persuasion I could muster to talk them into giving me more time. But they finally did, only to find that in 7 months we had a small bank balance and had laid off no one. Before I heard about temperaments, I would have to fight harboring a bitter attitude towards such doomsdayers. Once I recognized their natural tendency, I wrote it off as their temperament and refused to take it personally, or to give in without a fight. Sanguine board members are talkers, not doers or listeners. They need to be given something to do and held accountable. Their talk at board meetings should be limited to their production. Cholerics tend to take over if you give them a chance. But if you have a project of importance you want passed by a board you serve on, I suggest you talk to the cholerics in advance and get them on your team. When the meeting comes, they will carry the ball for you and will intimidate all the doomsdayers into agreement. Melancholies can be exasperating with their inexhaustible supply of questions. No matter what you bring up, they can think of objections, difficulties, and problems that will be encountered. It has always mystified me that they can always remember illustrations of those who failed trying to do what you suggest, but they can never remember those who succeeded. Phlegmatics are easy to get along with on boards, particularly if you don't expect them to be anything. But if your proposal is going to cost them money, don't count on their support. Always present the cost of a project along with a reasonable plan for repayment, and your phlegmatic friends will go along with you. Since no board or committee is made up of just one kind of temperament, but usually will have all four represented, you will find life as a leader, pastor, or chairman easier if you plan your presentation with all temperaments in mind. Preparation is the name of the game. But don't forget to pray. That's where the real power comes from. 7. Use the temperament theory in parenting. Every child is different not only in size, shape, looks, and intelligence but in temperament blend. For that reason, you will find the temperament theory a helpful tool in parenting, particularly in the way you discipline. We have one child that I only gave 2 spankings during her entire childhood, and yet she is an unspoiled young woman today. The other 3 children, I won't estimate the times we went to the woodshed. What made the difference? Their temperaments. Sanguine children are the easiest to love. They are born charmers, and if you aren't careful they will charm you out of obedience. Such children grow up to lie, cheat, and in some cases steal. Sanguines need love, but even more they need discipline. And don't let them sass you or they will learn to be disrespectful toward all adults. Choleric children usually take more spankings to raise than any other type. And they can be willful. You must break their will, but be careful you don't break their spirit. How do you keep from breaking their spirit while you mold their will? By being loving and cultivating a close relationship while at the same time you demand obedience. They will test you, don't fail their test. Melancholy children need love and security, while at the same time they need to learn self-sufficiency. They usually don't require a great deal of physical discipline, but will respond to a soft word of displeasure. One trait you must watch is criticism and a negative spirit, particularly if their secondary temperament is choleric. A Melchior can be both negative and willful. Melancholy children need lots of parental reassurance that they do have worth and value, and that is what parents are for. Phlegmatic children are easy to raise, particularly if you don't care if they never amount to anything in life. They don't cause trouble and rarely sass you back, they just live in their fantasy world of daydreams and function up to 60% of their potential, unless you prod them along. It is important to cultivate their curiosity level when they are very young. This is the one child that should rarely be kept in a playpen, for it is those early years, according to the experts, that ignite or stifle a child's curiosity, depending on whether he is free to inquire or confide. Like all children, they thrive on affection and do their best when gently but consistently pressured. Child training is almost a full-time vocation in the early years when a child needs what psychiatrist Harold V. Oath calls mother constancy. That is why God gave children 2 parents, so one can be with them in those most formative years of life. Today's emphasis on working mothers, whether it is necessary or not, is destined to create a whole generation of rebellious or insecure young people. You don't have to be perfect or an expert parent to be a good parent, but parenting must be high on your priority list when your children are under 10. Ideally they will have one parent at home until they start working or playing sports after school. For additional insight into good child raising, see my wife's book How to Develop Your Child's Temperament. The use and abuse of temperaments. Like any good concept, the temperament theory can be abused. It is not a cure-all for everything. And sometimes a person doesn't even fit into a temperament blend because his 2 temperaments are so evenly matched, or he may even have 3 temperaments. In addition, his childhood or lifetime experiences may have overemphasized or overdominated one temperament at the exclusion of the other. However, this theory is still the best tool for helping the largest number of people that has ever been devised. Unfortunately, some people abuse this tool, which causes some to turn against it before giving it careful consideration. Here are the 3 most common ways of abusing the theory. 1. As a psychological club to bludgeon their friends. One of the things that has turned more people against this theory than anything else is the thoughtless individuals who publicly humiliate their friends by analyzing them, with special emphasis on the negative characteristics. Parents can do this with devastating harm to their children. I rarely tell a person what temperament I think he is even when he asks, and never do I tell him in public. Not that any temperament is a shame or should be, but no one likes to be stripped psychologically bare in public. Use it for self-help and understanding or to improve your relations with others, but never use it like a club. You may evoke laughter, but whether you know it or not, you will also evoke pain. 2. As an excuse to indulge your weaknesses. Improvement is what this book is all about, self-improvement, that is. But if you condone your temperament-induced weaknesses by saying, "It's because of my temperament," you're hopeless. It may be that your temperament makes you a 24-hour-a-day non-stop talker. But you can improve. If you face that weakness and summon God's help to gain a quiet spirit. You may be a dominant compulsive, but don't say, "I'm a choleric melancholy and can't change." You're right, you can't because you won't. God can induce you though, with a hefty dose of compassion, much to the relief of your friends. But you must let Him. And don't think that because you're a melancholy, you have to go through life nitpicking everyone else, criticizing others, and making yourself depressed by indulging in self-pity. God can give you joy, peace, love, and a gracious spirit, if you want it. Or if you happen to be a phlegmatic, don't sit around and let your life slip by because it takes too much effort to get out of your easy chair. And don't excuse your passivity by saying, "That's the way I am." You have many positive traits, concentrate on those, and force yourself to be available to God to help other people. You will like the results better. 3. To categorize everyone you meet. While it is true, we all have a temperament combination, it is no service to you or other people to always think of them in the light of their temperament in the first place. Snap decisions can be wrong, and in the second place, you may forget the person while concentrating on his temperament. One thing we all need to develop is a sincere interest in and love for other people. Just as we learn to love and accept people regardless of their looks or physical characteristics, we need to learn to get acquainted with people regardless of their temperaments. Our Lord looked into the heart of Nicodemus, Andrew, and others, not just their outer shell. While we do not have His divine ability to see the heart as it really is, we can learn to see the real person that is often shrouded by physical characteristics and temperament. The Bible speaks of the hidden man of the heart. That is the real person. Get to know him. The proper use of the temperament theory. There are many good uses for the temperament theory that far outweigh any dangers or misuse the tool can be put to. We have already spent a whole chapter on these, but let me summarize this book by listing the 3 I think are the most important. 1. Self-acceptance. This theory helps you come to grips with who you are in the framework that exposes the fact that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. 2. Self-improvement. Once you have examined your weaknesses and understand why you act the way you do, you are better able to call upon God for His resources to improve your temperament by strengthening your weaknesses. 3. Understanding and accepting others. As long as you live, you will be confronted by people. When you understand why they do what they do, it is easier to accept and love them. It is my sincere desire and prayer that reading this book is helping you in all 3 of the above uses of this theory. If it has, we will both be pleased. In the event you are a teacher of these principles and would like to order a set of the overhead transparencies that go with it as a handy aid to communication, just write my office. Or if you have a specific question on temperament that is not answered in this book, please send it to me and I will include it in my next book on this subject. In the meantime, I recommend taking the LaHaye temperament analysis as a very valuable help in further improving your temperament.